Hello. Today we're going to be talking about equipment appraisal and how you can go about selling and appraising, or simply finding out what is the best gear to either trade, keep for yourself, or to sell either to a vendor or on the board so that you can make ED. Unlike the last video, this one is going to require much more upfront ED that you already have to get started, and things like events and people that you know, and simply having access to information about the game is going to be a lot more crucial this time around. Starting at the beginning, when you run dungeons, some of the items that you will get will be just random equipment pieces. When you first start the game, it gives you an equipment set for level 1, but there's nothing much you can do with it besides dismantling it and hoping for some good beginner crystals and blessed enhancement stones. Nothing really too special. But then after that, your epic quest will start giving you full sets in cubes, which you can then use for just leveling and dungeon purposes so you can get through the game. But you will also start to notice that you will be getting just random pieces of gear that you may or may not use. Please don't use it. That you can use for other purposes, such as just selling it or dismantling it for whatever reason. We're going to be talking about how you can take each piece of just normal equipment and take it to the next level, as far as it can go in the grand scheme of making you ED. Now, the first area that will give you reasonable payback as you try to sell your ED is probably going to be between Hamel and Sander, where when you start actually selling the weapons of either the elite or unique variety, you will start to make some pretty decent ED. Everything before that is kind of chump change, and you would be better off dismantling the normal gear so that you can get other items such as blessed enhancement stones and magical crystals, which you can use for a variety of other reasons. You can also directly just sell the blessed enhancement stones and magical crystals for a much higher return on profit than if you just went to a local vendor, or please don't ever try to do this, sell the actual random gear you get from normal dungeons, from Rune all the way up to Elysian, since Varnamir seems to not drop random loot anymore, unfortunately. Now, as you get through the game and you get higher levels, you will hopefully come across the point where you come to around level 70 or 80. It starts at level 70, but you really should start doing it at level 80 because you'll have good gear and you won't hold your party back. But you'll be introduced to the heroic and secret dungeon areas that have been reworked since the last time I had uploaded. So when you go into the secret dungeon, you'll be encountering the secret dungeon sets, which unfortunately at the time of this recording aren't viable for endgame. It's basically a stepping stone so that you can perform as you progress from secret dungeons to heroic, and then let's say the top of Elysian, and then finally Vardamir. So you're going to be starting out with one of the 7 secret dungeon sets, and to appraise them will require pretty substantial knowledge about the character that you're using and the purposes that the gear will have for you as you try to snowball it into making a better set of gear later on down the line. Insofar as selling it, you're not going to be making a large return on investment just selling secret dungeon gear because of how, I guess, unequivocally useless it is in the endgame. But you can make a small margin by selling the boxes that you get from doing secret dungeons, which hold either elite or unique pieces. The elite boxes, which you can get one weapon box of whatever you choose when you open it on the character. It will be whatever character who opens it will be the weapon that you'll get. You can just sell that box for about 1 mil or below. Not really anything special. But you can get other cubes of top piece, bottom piece, gloves, and shoes that you can sell for about 1 mil up to 5 mil of the elite variety. The unique variety, however, you can start selling that for about 5 mil. I've seen weapons go all the way up to 20 to 30 mil. Just the boxes alone. And if you have secret dungeon gear that you're trying to move up from, and it's of a reasonable, decent variety, such as having a plus 10 SD weapon or gear piece, you can seal that with a golden seal and plop it on the board for about 100, 200, maybe 300 mil, but that's kind of pushing it. I see the only reason that someone would probably buy one of those is to use a higher level blacksmith and advance dismantle it for that plus 10 or a plus 9. But as far as selling it so that you would be cycling into the server something that is useful to people, that is very unlikely. And it's more of a show of appreciation for other people who may be beneath you, trying to make their way up as well. We're also going to be talking about 4D. The fourth dimension set that you get from Hinner is also something related to equipment that you can use to make money. By running Hinner for the dailies, you can start to craft your Hinner set, starting with the armor and the weapon being the most expensive thing to craft. So the top, bottom, gloves, and shoes are going to be the first tier, and then the second tier is going to be the weapon. And how you can start to make money from 4D is by enhancing it to around plus 9 or plus 10 with a blacksmith, or with a amulet from an event, or if you have the extra ED, if you see someone undercutting on the board for a plus 9 or a plus 10, you can also do it that way. However, I think that if you had access to an amulet like that, it would be better to just sell the amulet outright later on when the prices have normalized. But if you're able to naturally upgrade a piece of 4D equipment to plus 9 or plus 10, you can sell it for a nice chunk of change. About 500 mil to 1 bill is what I've seen them hovering around, because unfortunately, unlike Heroic, unlike Void Weapon, unlike, I guess, Elrianode gear as well, not necessarily in that order, it is not something that is going to be viable in the end game unless it is extremely highly enhanced, because it lacks the heroic set effects that you would get from either Heroic or Elrianode gear, and the weapon is not as powerful as a Heroic rank 29, or specifically from 25 plus, and it is not nearly in the same league as the Void Weapon or the soon-to-be new raid weapon from Varnamir. So you'll be needing to have an extremely good 4D set, preferably one that you've been using for a while, that you had upgraded a long time ago, because I do not see you spending a gold seal to put it on the board and make either marginal or not even make your money back on investment as you make 4D gear. Unfortunately, it is something that you would have to have done a long time ago before the whole Elrianode gear and Varnamir update. Now, after you get the secret dungeon sets and grinding out of the way, and you continue to move forwards, you will be getting to one of the areas where the most contention lies in how you can actually start making real money with your equipment, and that is starting with heroics. Heroics are pretty interesting because of the amount of effects, the amount of damage scaling, and the amount of just general types and combinations that heroic gears can give you. The three things that you need to pay attention to when appraising your heroic gear is the heroic rank, the second line of specific heroic effects that can do various things, and the type of heroic gear, which there are three types: wisdom, vision, and wrath. The two out of the three that are the most coveted are wisdom, because it, as a set effect, allows you to decrease mana cost of your of your skills that you use in dungeon, and the wrath allows you to have bonus skill damage for its set effect just for free, all skill damage. Vision, on the other hand, it decreases cooldown, which is not as useful as the other skills for increasing your combat power and just overall being useful to whatever class that you're using. If you're using a class that uses mostly actives or tenacity skills or even strength skills, it's not as useful because of the low cooldowns that already exist on those type of skills. So after that, we should be breaking down the categories of heroic gear that will be most beneficial to making you the most money. So from bottom tier to low tier to mid tier to high tier effects. Starting from the weapon, you are going to want the weapon to be at least rank 25 plus. So from rank 25 onwards is where you're going to be starting to be more discerning on whether or not you should use a very expensive gold seal that at the time of this recording is around 250 to almost 300 mil on the board to seal it and at least make some profit back, just as a baseline. And after that, you're going to be wondering if it's going to be a vision, wisdom, or wrath weapon. However, weapons are special because unlike the other four types of armors, top, bottom, gloves, and shoes, the type of weapon doesn't really affect its pricing all that much, because what people like to do is you can either craft your heroic sets in either a 2 out of 5, 2 out of 5, and then weapon, whatever that weapon is up to their discretion or what they have access to, or you can do a 3 out of 5, 2 out of 5, which means you have 3 pieces including the weapon, and 2 pieces, which may or may not include the weapon. So for instance, you can have a vision weapon with a top and bottom that are wrath, and gloves and shoes that are wisdom. So that way you're still getting the wisdom set effect and the wrath set effect, but your weapon still does a lot of damage. And for people who are selling, that means that any weapons, regardless of their type, can be sold at a relatively high margin. Now, the effects you can have on your weapon, there are some universal heroic effects that are pretty low to bottom tier, and then there are the weapon specific effects that can maybe boost its appeal and the skill damage that is on the weapon, top, bottom, gloves, and shoes, which is admittedly kind of negligible, but depending on who you're selling it to or how good the skill is, can affect the price as well. So in bottom tier, we have damage increase in proportion to HP loss. Not a very good one. Skill cooldown time upon defeating a supreme monster. Also not a good one. Bottom tier. Damage received when 30% HP or less. Can be sort of a fun effect to have on classes that rely on being low HP to dish out more damage, like VC or Nova Imperator and Bloody Queen. So maybe when selling specifically to those classes, you could bump it up to low tier, maybe mid tier, but I don't think it's something that you should be worrying about when looking at skill tier options. The next thing you have is damage upon attacking an enemy with 30% HP or less, which is pretty negligible. Bottom tier, debuff effect duration, also pretty bottom tier. And recovery item effect, also bottom tier. These effects that I just listed are not going to raise your item's value at all in any significant amount. The thing above those are the low tier effects, which may bump up your pricing up to maybe 10 mil, maybe 30 mil, maybe even 50 mil, but not so much to make you so much more money that you should be clamoring over these effects. And I only have 3 in this tier for weapons, which is upon attacking, a chance for poison fog, upon attacking, a chance for sea of flames, and resistance to all attributes for 10 seconds upon attacking. The cloud effects for poison and sea of flames are strictly DOT, which can be a nice bonus effect if you were just using the weapon, but as far as appraising it, it's not really all that great a look when people are just looking for a weapon that has really decent effects for them when they're running dungeons. The next tier above that would be mid tier, and this is when things get kind of interesting because your price can spike significantly depending on who you're selling it to, or it can be just a simple 50 to even 100 mil increase in sales. So the 3 I have here are next attack's damage after 10th attack, ignores magical defense power, and ignores physical defense power. Pretty solid effects that can garner much more attention towards your weapon and make it look more attractive to those people willing to shell out just a little bit more and bump up your weapon's overall appraisal rating. Now, the high tier effects are going to make your weapon extremely attractive and can maybe even double its overall price range, depending on who you're selling to, and depending on what the market's looking like as a whole. There are 5 effects: item drop rate, MP cost down, gust, ice zone, and damage dealt to boss monsters. Now, item drop rate does not directly affect combat power, which is something they introduced recently that has replaced the item level so that you can get into dungeons at a certain level range or at a certain item level range. But as far as people who are just grinding dungeons, it is really good so that they can make more return on their investment for running dungeons. So it kind of balances itself out. You can't run certain dungeons with a low combat power level, but the effect is so good for people who are just grinding to grind on item drop rate characters or during events. It's such a novel and powerful effect that it kind of scales itself up by that fact alone. The other 2 zones, Gust and Ice, they are much better than their counterparts because they actually have stun effects in dungeon, which can be a little bit more useful than just having a zone that appears that just does DOT damage, in my opinion. And the ice zone in particular lowers the... It's kind of like having the ice debuff effect, where it lowers their defenses by about 30%. Now moving on for weapons, we have the top piece, and basically all of the other 4 types of armor pieces, you want to have them at least 15, rank 15 plus, but the ideal rank for your gear, armor pieces, is 24 plus. 15 plus is where you start, and then 24 plus is where you would want to start bumping up your price significantly. Now from there, we have the same bottom tier skills as the weapon, damage increase, skill cooldown, and all of that are pretty universal effects on all of the heroic gears that you can get. But then they also have armor only effects, and then there's one effect that you can only get on the top piece, which is called attacked. But let's start from the bottom. The additional bottom tier skills that are not going to increase your weapons or your armor's price are the cooldowns. Strength, tenacity, flexibility, and bravery skill cooldown time down are not going to significantly affect its price. And then we have low tier bravery skill cooldown, which is a little bit better, but it's still not going to greatly increase your appraisal rating of your armor. And then you also have skill cooldown after such and such attack, and depending on who you're selling that to, such as the bravery classes, they can make that work, maybe, but still not a very good effect. Then we have the mid tier, same as the weapon, ignoring magical and physical defense. And here you can start to have significant increasings to your combat power level and just an overall good effect in general. Doesn't scale that well, but still enough to warrant its higher price than normal, as opposed to the low and bottom tier skills. And then we have attacked, probably the most valuable top piece effect. And then MP cost down and item drop rate, for the same reason I mentioned from the weapon. And MP cost down is universally a high tier effect that can raise your item's price by a significant amount. And attacked would usually start at maybe 300 mil plus, depending on the percentage, and only go up from there if you have a high rank, if you have wisdom or wrath, and if the skill line is something that is desirable to the class that you're selling to, or just a really good skill in general, so that you can put it on the board, and if somebody sees it, they're willing to shell out an extra ED 100, maybe 200 mil or 2 for your item. After that, you have the bottom piece, same rank, 15 plus, 24 plus up. Have the same bottom tier skill effects exactly as the top piece, same low tier skill effects, and mid tier is where we start to get interesting changes in design, because the top piece, gloves, and what we're on right now, the bottom piece, has specific bottom piece only effects that are the party buffs that will increase party's critical damage, party's maximize, party's additional damage, party's damage reduction, party's magical attack power, and party's physical attack power, as well as physical and magical defense, which are not that great at all. Now, in mid-tier, I put critical, maximize, additional damage, and damage reduction as the party effects that are going to cause some people to look your way, but not exactly going to bump up the price significantly. In high tier, however, we have party physical attack and magical attack power, as well as party's attack speed for those people who like to PvP or just go fast. Party's physical and magical attack power increases your damage significantly, as I believe it is multiplicative, not additive. to your overall physical and magical attack power, which means that people are looking for this piece in droves and are willing to pay premium price to get it. It also has MP cost down and item drop rate and high tier for the same reasons as before. And here we have gloves, same exact bottom tier effects, low tier effects, and mid tier, which is ignoring magical and physical defense. And here we have the special glove effect that has been nerfed or buffed, depending on who you talk to all skill damage. In the past, about probably a month ago at the time of this video going up, we had a just skill stacking effect for skill stacking of all tiers of skills in the game. So we had stacking for flex, we had stacking for tenacity skills, we had stacking for strength skills, and we had stacking for bravery skills. They took that and changed it so that it fits better with the new combat power system, because those stacking gloves do not directly affect your combat power because they are buffs and not direct additions to the stats in the combat power window that you can see on your stat window. So all skill damage is really coveted right now because of the huge spike it has to your combat power to allow you to get into higher combat power dungeons in Varnamir and other places. Mostly Varnamir. And possibly 11.5 if you do not have the 150k required to go into the normal mode. And from there, since it is also a relatively new type of skill, it's going for a lot of money right now. So my plan, or my suggestion to people who want to make money, is to run as much hero as you can on all the characters that you can, so that you can get your weekly and daily done, and then take all of your heroic fragments, go to Glaive, and trade him for gloves, and gloves only. Because not only is the exchange rate really good, 90 for one glove, all of the gloves that you get have been also changed from giving you either elite or unique pieces to only giving you unique pieces, therefore making the odds highly in your favor that you will get an all skill damage glove that you can sell for a lot of ED. Now in last place, unfortunately, we have shoes that do not have a special effect, unlike weapon, top, bottom, and gloves. So that means their bottom, low, mid, and high tier effects are going to be exactly the same as the rest, with high tier being MP cost down and item drop rate. Particularly MP cost down are the type that most people are going to want to buy in droves. Now after that, once you have gotten to the Elrianode area, they will be dropping L tiers, which are basically the same effects as heroic, but it's been modified in a way so that you do the first 2 dungeons in Elrianode, 11.1 and 11.2, you finish the story quest that gives you free L tiers, and 11.2 in particular gives you a full Elrianode gear set, which you can sell because it is a unique set that you can seal with gold pieces. And the special thing about this set is that when you enhance it from +1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up to 13 if you're crazy enough, which I don't think anyone on the server has yet, the effects that you can actually put on the gear also go up. So having a +9 Elrianode top piece is much more valuable than a +9 heroic top piece of the same kind, because you can add extra slots into it, therefore increasing its value. So if you're trying to sell Elrianode gear without any effects, but they just had a high enhancement level, that is completely viable and people do this much more often than you think. But talking about the heroic or the Elrianode tiers themselves, the actual tiers, as in being bottom, high, low, mid, are exactly the same because they're the same effects, with a couple caveats because of the nature of the L tiers. So, L tiers come in 3 varieties, just like heroic gear: blue, red, and purple. And the blue piece affects magical attack power, the red piece affects physical attack power, and purple is mainly people have designated for PvP. The most coveted of these 3 are blue because they are, quite frankly, just more magical attack power using characters that exist, and more of those characters are good for PvE in general, so they have the monopoly on that as of right now. Therefore, blue will be always more profitable if you were to get your hands on it, and it has the right effects. So, the other 4 things that you need to worry about when appraising Elrianode gear is the 4 types that come in the way of balance, destruction, proficiency, and transformation, which affect the effects that you will get when you identify the L tier. So balance is kind of like heroic ranks, so that when you identify it, you can get a certain level rank on the balance tier, going from 1 all the way up to 20 for an elite tier, and for a unique tier you go all the way up from 21 to 29. So therefore, the unique balance tiers are inherently more valuable than the elite tiers because they can only go up to 20, which is fine, but anything lower than 20 is not going to be very appraisal worthy. After that, you will have the destruction tiers. The destruction tiers, starting from bottom tier, are generally going to be very undesirable skills that no one wants to use on their character. So those are going to be an immediate dismantle. Going up to low tier, which are going to be low tier skills with high percentages, still not very good. Immediately dismantle those. Mid tier, it's going to be relatively good skills with high percents, and that's when you're going to start to try to make some money. But to make real money with destruction tiers, you're going to need the most coveted skills around the characters that need them to stack for extra damage, and the uniques are going to go to 12% as the cap. So an extremely good skill at 12% is going to net you a lot of money if you manage to roll those on a destruction tier. But more often than not, appraising destruction tiers is going to come down to character knowledge and your ability to communicate with other players of other characters. Okay, so proficiency is going to be the same effects as the heroic second line that we discussed earlier. Nothing much is going to change except for a couple really key features, being all the effects are going to be pretty much the same, except for the ability to have party buffs on your top, bottom, gloves, and shoes. Heroics, you can only have them on the bottom piece. The bottom piece still does have all of its party effects, except now you can have them also on the top, gloves, and shoes. However, you also need to consider that the other top tier effects that were on the top, gloves, not so much shoes because shoes didn't have a special effect, attack on a top piece would cap out at 10%, but now it's going to cap out at this new Elrianode only effect called 2 times your enhancement level. So if whatever your enhancement level of your Elrianode piece, the gear itself is, when you put that effect on it, it's going to multiply it by whatever the enhancement level is, therefore increasing the percentage value or potential by a very significant amount. So therefore it's going to be a lot more valuable in the long run. Top pieces also carry party's critical, so if you don't have access to attack or anything like that, if you're trying to go for CP increase or damage increase, I guess you can run that to help out your party, or just have another top piece altogether. For bottom piece, you have the same thing going on with all your party attacks, or party buffs, magical, physical, attack speed, and all that. However, now you have access to that same effect that we discussed before for attack on the top piece. You're going to have party magical attack 2 times enhancement level. So same thing applies there. That would be the top tier, the highest tier for appraising its value and trying to sell it for a lot of ED, up in the billions range, depending on who you're selling it to. Gloves are the tricky one right now, because after we lost the ability to get skill stacking, if you had it already, they're going to go a bit up in value because they still are the best way to output damage. However, they are not going to count towards your combat power level because it is a buff. Therefore, it does not show up in your window. Therefore, it does not contribute at all to your combat power level. But it does increase your raw damage. Your combat power is just an estimate, whereas your raw damage, or whatever you're going to be outputting, is based on a lot of factors that aren't specifically tallied in that window. You also have the all skill damage, which also has that effect of timesing itself by 5. So it would be all skill damage 5 times your enhancement level. So if you had something at plus 13, which I don't think anybody in the server does have, it would go up by 65%. The normal percentage cap without that effect would be 44%, which is still nothing to sneeze at and would still net you a very large and decent return on investment, but that's just something to note. Also, the party effect for gloves would be additional damage, which is okay for PvP, but I don't think anybody would shell out that much for it for PvE. So only purple party additional damage would be worth it. After that, you have shoes, which are extremely flexible, probably the most flexible piece that you can dance around with if you need extra stats, if you're building an item drop rate character, you need some more boss damage. The party effect, the party buff for shoes are maximized, which is also nice. You also have the shoes only effect of decreasing all defense upon using a command attack for 5 seconds. And depending on the percentage of that and depending on who you're selling that to, it can be a pretty useful thing to keep in the back if you get a really nice percentage on that. And that's about it for proficiency. And next we have the transformation tiers, which are basically just stat boost. Just any stats from critical, maximized attack speed, awakening charge, all of that, except for specialization A and B, which have been removed. I think appraising transformation tiers is pretty straightforward. If you yourself aren't using them for just extra stats that you don't need, or extra stats you don't get from passives or other means like elixirs, critical damage is the most valuable transformation stat, and if you get critical damage plus 3%, depending on the color and the time, because if too many people are pulling critical damage, then it's not going to be as lucrative to sell it. You might want to hold on to it. That is the only transformation tier that it's going to net you a large chunk of change at the moment. And that's about it for transformation. Then after that, a quick word on pet jellies. Pet jellies are something you can craft at a blacksmith by using your magical crystals so that you can trade for either a normal jelly, a fantastic jelly, which is the purple one, and a gray jelly, which lowers your pet's affinity. The fantastic jellies usually sell for around 1.5 mil, so it's a free way to just cycle around pet food that is in the equipment area that you can feed your pet for free with just dismantling trash gear, or you can sell it and make about 1.5 mil or 1.2 mil profit because of taxes on the board. Please note that the charts are not a hard and fast way to price your gear. It is simply just an estimate to how the market has been kind of fluctuating around these effects for quite some time. So only use them as a pseudo cheat sheet, if anything else, to go around and have like a base price, because percentages are what is really going to make or break what your effects are in the long run. So I just wanted to note that. And I think that's it. I think that's every major item and method that you can use for selling things that come out of your weapons tab. And I hope that this has been informative, and I hope that the information was presented clearly and deliberately and effectively. And even if you had knew all of this information, plus some, that you would be able to use this video to help other people get across your points clearly. And if there are any errors or anything like that, please let me know in the comment section, and I will be on the lookout. Please look forward to the next video that I'm working on to complete this septilogy. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you later.